the 4 church-state confederacies. Okay, and I'm your speaker, Brother Obi Chilala. So we find that there are 4 church-state confederacies in total, okay, which are mentioned in the Bible, in the Word of God. Of course, there are other, we've had so many church-state confederacies between a nation and a nation. We're talking about sovereign state. Between 2 or amongst a number of them, but that's none of our business. We are instructed only to watch for that which involves the church. So we find that there are 4 of them in total. So we're going to discuss them and consider each one of them in this, our presentation for today. All right, so we have to have a type. This is what we believe, and that's what the Bible says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11. The Bible reads, "Now all these things happened unto them." The pronoun "them" refers to ancient Israel, because this whole chapter of the 10th chapter of the first book of Corinthians is giving an account of ancient Israel. Now here in verse 11 it says, "Now all these things happened unto them, ancient Israel, for in samples." Okay, the word in samples means types, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. All right, so we happen to be the people upon whom the ends of the world are come. That expression, end of the world, is another way of saying latter days or last days or time of the end, the time in which we live. So those things that happened to ancient Israel are our types, our examples. So we are going to make an application of it, to us according to what the message teaches. So let's begin by looking at the very first confederacy, which would be the type. Okay, so when I say the type, this has to do with ancient Israel. So we are talking about one in the Old Testament. And the first confederacy, the type was between Syria and Ephraim. And it is recorded in the book of Isaiah, chapter 7. So let's read these 2 verses about that Church-State Confederacy. Verse 1. "And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Ramaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it." Then verse 2, "And it was taught to the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, and his heart was moved." Okay, the pronoun his refers to the king of Judah. Okay, that would be Ahaz. It says, "And the heart of his people," that is, as the tree of the wood. Sorry, the screen is too wide. I'm unable to read the other words, but then let me see, let me go here. Verse 2, it says, "And it was taught of the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim. And his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind." Okay, so end of quote. So these 2 verses are telling us or are talking about the Church-State Confederacy that existed way back in the Old Testament between Syria, a sovereign state or a heathen power, with Ephraim. Ephraim would be the 10 tribe, or in other words, would say the northern kingdom. So they came together against Judah, the 2 tribes, which would be the southern kingdom. That's what they did. So let's see what happened concerning that Church-State Confederacy by reading further on verse 7 and 8. All right, so verse 7, the Bible reads, "Thus says the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass." Verse 8, "For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is risen, and within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it shall be not a people." All right, so we find that God was against that Church-State Confederacy, and he said that it was not going to stand, and within 65 years, it was going to be broken. And we find that that was fulfilled when Assyria, another sovereign power, a heathen power, came and broke off that Church-State Confederacy. So we can read about that from the book of 2 Kings chapter 16. We want to go to verses again, 7 and 8 of that book and that chapter. All right, so here it is. We are talking about Assyria, another heathen power, defeats and scatter Israel. That would be the northern kingdom and Syria Confederacy. All right, so we'll go, these will still assist us. Let's go to let's read verse 11. Verse 11 says, "And the king of Assyria did carry away Israel into Syria, and put them in Hara and in Haba by the river Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes." So this is how Assyria broke the Church-State Confederacy between Syria and the northern kingdom of Ephraim, the 10 tribes, and did take those people into captivity, into slavery, and put them in those cities of that kingdom. So now we want to identify the characters, the 4 characters that were involved in that Church-State Confederacy. So here we are looking at who is who in the type. We have Syria was a sovereign power, a heathen government, which federated with Ephraim, the 10 tribe, or the northern kingdom, if you like, against Judah, which would be the southern kingdom, the 2 tribes. And Judah had to hire, or the northern kingdom went to another heathen power called Assyria, and solicited them to come to their aid against Syria and Ephraim Church-State Confederacy. So we have Syria, a heathen power, Ephraim, the 10 tribe, then Judah, the 2, and Assyria, another heathen power, which broke that Church-State Confederacy of Ephraim and Assyria. Second confederacy occurred during the Dark Ages. All right, so we've come from the type, we are coming into the antitype. The antitype would be the period after the cross. In other words, we are looking at another Church-State Confederacy in the new dispensation during the Christian era. So that one would be the antitype of the one that we have just considered from the Old Testament in Isaiah 7. And the antitype was during the Dark Ages period, which we all know about. And let's read about it here All right, let me just reread this quote. We are in 12 Symbolic Code number 1, page 6, paragraph 1. It says, through these scriptures and historical facts, we have learned that the antitype of Israel and Syria's confederacy took place commencing in the 1st century AD, when one part of the Christians, Israel, federated with pagans, Syria, against their Christians, Judah. But their combined church-state power was broken by the Protestant nations, Assyria. After Emmanuel, which is the born-again Christians, came, but before they had advanced in truth far enough to know how to choose between good and evil, and before the younger Christians, represented by the second son, Mahasharahaspas of chapter 8, that is of the book of Isaiah, had progressed enough even to know their father, God, and their mother, the church. End of quote. So this quote is telling us about the second Church-State Confederacy in the Christian era. It gives us the time frame, the time element when it commenced around the 1st century AD, and the 4 players that were involved. Okay, so it is very important to note that the power that broke that Church-State Confederacy would be the Protestant nations. So they are called and typical Assyria. So there we have all the 4, typical players that we listed early on. All right, so it says, Second Confederacy, roles reversed. Okay, here we have Israel, Christians who apostatized in the Dark Ages. Those are the ones that formed the confederacy with the typical Assyria, if you like, a sovereign power, a hidden power government. So that one would be typical Assyria, which in reality was Rome, Papal Rome. You remember that's what formed that Church-State Confederacy. Then Judah persecuted Christians in the Dark Ages. That would be the other part which remained loyal and true to God. Then we have typical Assyria representing the Protestant nations who broke up that union of Rome. So therefore, the Church-State Confederacy of the Dark Ages would be number 2. Remember, we are considering the 4 that are noted in the Bible. So the second confederacy was broken by the Protestant nations. That would be the Protestantism. And let's read from 1 Ezra on page 211, paragraph 0. It says, for the first time, these 10 kings represented as horns are brought to our attention by the scriptures found in Daniel 2:41 and 42, represented by the 10 toes on the great image in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. All right, so this quote, end of the quote, it helps us to see that the 10 horns represents the same as the 10 toes. The 10 horns of the beast represents the same with the 10 toes of the great image of Daniel chapter 2 on verses 41 and 42. And those represent the power that broke the Church-State Confederacy of the 1st century, the antitype. Okay, the other quote, it says, if the 10 horns of this beast represents the kings now in existence, at which time shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, quoting the words of Daniel. Then the beast himself represents the period following Rome, as the breaking down of the Roman Empire brought about the existence of these kings. It is also being termed Rome in her broken state, symbolized by the great image of Daniel chapter 2, verse 42. The feet and toes of which are composed of iron and clay. Iron is the metal which represents Rome, the clay, the broken part. End of quote. So this is very clear that the beast with 10 horns of Revelation 13 represents the same power with the 10 toes of the human statue of Daniel chapter 2. And that's the one that broke the Church-State Confederacy of Rome. So we now come to the time of the leopard-like beast, and we find that there is no year indicating the rise of that beast. Okay, if you have the charts, please, you can go to the beast chart number 13. All right, so yeah, here it is. Why no year for the rise of the leopard-like beast? That's what we want to understand. And for answer, we turn to Shepherd's Road, volume 2, on page 86, paragraph 3. Here it reads, to John, the leopard-like beast was shown not in its unfolding process, but rather in its closing act. For he says, quote, and his deadly wound was healed, end of quote. He saw in vision the beast after the deadly wound had been healed, for he uses the past tense was. So end of the quote, 2 SR page 86, paragraph 3. So here we are told that God was not interested to show John the Revelator the unfolding would be the beginning of this beast, but God was interested to show its downfall. Now, there is an important thing that we need to understand, is that when the beast came out of the sea, it had all its parts on it. So let's turn to Time Reading, volume 2, number 17, and we want to read on page 8, paragraph 1. What year did the leopard-like beast come out of the sea and start to form? Because that's what happened. When it came out, immediately it started to go down. So we read from 2TG number 17, page 8. It says the horns and heads all being on the beast at the same time, not coming up one after another, or in like manner falling off, as the horns in Daniel chapter 7 and 8, should forever convince every rational mind that the horns and heads symbolize civil and religious bodies, all existing at the same time, not one following the other, end of quote. So you see, we have to have rational mind. We have to be rational-minded people to be convinced of this fact, that when the beast came out of the sea, it had all its parts on it. So for us to know when it came out of the sea and immediately started declining, we have to understand when it had its final part on it. And to do that, we go back to 2SR. All right, so here it is, page 107, paragraph 1. Before the 1260 year ended in 1798, the 4 Protestant nations were already in existence, namely Lutheran, Presbyterian, Methodist, and Christian. All right, so we are told that during the Dark Ages, during the reign of the Church-State Confederacy, the first one of the first century, that of the Dark Ages, we are told that 4 major, Protestant denominations were already in existence. This is telling you that part of the leopard-like beast had begun, but it had not yet come on the stage of action. The quote continues, but after 1798, that would mean after the fall of Papal Rome, came the First-day Adventists and the Seventh-day Adventists. From 1844 to 1929, completed his 7 heads. As Protestantism fell by the declaration of the second angel's message after 1844, and as the symbol of Revelation 13 in 1930 revealed that the Seventh-day Adventists wandered after the beast, which is the world, these 2 incidents healed the wound and drew the blasphemy over all 7 heads. Thus the complete fulfillment of the symbolical prophecy revealed the truth of the beast. as all other sects are but offshoots from these 7 bodies. The heads included all Christendom up to 1930. So this quote helps us to understand when the beast had its final part, which is the 7th head. And we are told that it was from 1844 to 1929. And what happened that year? That's when Davidianism, or if you like, DSDA began, and that's what completed the beast. Therefore, that's the very year, 1929, that the beast came out of the sea, and the very year that it began to fall. Leopard-like beast completed in 1929. That's right. So that's the year it was completed. The Shepherd's Road message of reform came to the SDA church, and it was rejected. And we see also the Italian government granted civil power to the Pope, on the 11th day of February 1929. All right, so this would indicate the healing of the wound, which is the decline of that beast. Remember, God was not interested to show its unfolding, but its downfall. Hence the quoting of Revelation 13:3, and his deadly wound was healed. Now, let's read this quote from Ezra in that regard. It's what page? It's not showing. Sister Ho, what page?
209.
Oh, okay, 209.
Paragraph 1.
Paragraph 1. Okay, so it reads, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast." Revelation 13, verse 3. It is generally understood among Seventh-day Adventists that since the Italian government granted civil power to the Pope on the 11th day of February 1929 to be the event of the prophetic fulfillment, we shall grant that the interpretation is correct and the deadly wound has been healed. Note, the verbs was and healed are both in past tense. This being so, it is evident that this particular prophecy is to be fully understood after its fulfillment as to when and how accomplished. End of quote. All right, so by the year 1929, the wound had already been healed. Hence, the two words was and healed are in past tense. And the act of granting the civil power to the Pope in that year on the 11th day of the month of February was to show that the wound had healed. So the wound healed previous to 1929. This is what we understand from 2 SR page 209 that we have just read. That marked the beginning of the fall of the leopard-like beast, the healing of the deadly wound. So from the time of 1929, that's when the beast started going down. It came up the same way and started going down. Okay, so now we must understand that the healing of 1929 was a partial healing. We have to have the final healing of the wound. So now, concerning the final healing of the wound, let's understand a few things by reading from 2TG number 41, page 16, on paragraph 2. Here it says, it begins with a question. Does it not look to you as though the world is getting ready for a church and state government? I think from what I overheard, you were discussing before we began our study this afternoon, was something to show that the world is getting ready. So we would say, yes, we do. I have repeatedly pointed out that the world is unwittingly making a mighty effort to saddle the scarlet-colored beast of Revelation 17 and mount thereon Babylon the Great. End of quote. So Elijah is telling us that in his publication and in his presentations at Mount Carmel before he died, he repeatedly, pointed out the fact that the world was unwittingly making a mighty effort to put the woman on the back of the scarlet-colored beast of Revelation 17. That is one of the 4 church-state confederacies that we are discussing today. Okay, but before that one, remember we have just talked of 2. The type of Syria and Ephraim of Isaiah 7, and then that of the Dark Ages, immediately after the birth of Christianity, shortly thereafter. All right, so here we say the 4 confederacies. We want to show the 4 confederacies in their sequential order. Okay, because let's do that. The first confederacy is that of Syria and Ephraim, the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes. And the second one is the one represented by the horn head. Okay, if you go to the beast chart, you look at the second beast immediately after the cross. The second one, it has a horn head. That is indicating the second Church-State Confederacy during the reign of the nondescript beast of Daniel 7. And to be particular, verse 8. And the third one is represented by the healing of the deadly wound of the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13. Therefore, the one alluded to in the quote that I've just read in 2TG number 41, page 16, about the scarlet-colored beast would be the Church-State Confederacy number 4. So these are the 4, and in their sequential order. So let's look at the list again. We have number 1, Syria and Ephraim Confederacy. Number 2, we have purpose, represented by the horn head of the Dark Ages. Number 3 is the one noted by the words in Revelation 13, verse 3, the healing of the deadly wound. And this is the eminent one. And this is the one that you should all understand, because this is our test. After that, we have that of the woman sitting on the back of the scarlet-colored beast of Revelation 17, the huge and the last one, which will come after that, which is represented by the healing of the wound in our day. Okay. So we have to understand tract 12 reviews scarlet beast is the image of the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13. Let's read tract number 12, page 32, paragraph 1. It says, now from the manifest similarities between the leopard-like beast and the scarlet-colored beast, one should recognize that the latter, which is the scarlet-colored, is the image of the former, the leopard-like. He says, comma, his deadly wound having been healed, and his horns uncrowned. Okay? The crownless horns of the latter, which is the scarlet, show that he represents the world in a time in which there are no crowned kings, but that instead the world is ruled by an ecclesiastical head, dash the woman that drives the beast. End of quote. So, beloved, one is the object, the other is the image. The object is the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13. And then the scarlet is the image. This is what we are taught in this court. So if the scarlet, by the woman sitting on her back, and by the 10 crownless horns shows a church-state confederacy, you must understand that it depicts what happened to the leopard-like beast when the deadly wound had healed. So we have a church-state confederacy in the time of Assyria, noted by verse 3 of Revelation 13, and the deadly wound was healed, meaning the church-state confederacy was brought back and continued on in the time of Babylon, represented or symbolized by the scarlet-colored beast. Okay, so we have to understand, yet we still have to understand the final meaning of the healing of the wound. Okay, here we have 2TG number 41, verse 18. Oh, sorry, page 18, paragraph 3. It says, you remember that the chapter unveils a confederacy which ancient Israel, the 10-tribe kingdom, the church, made with the ancient Assyria, a sovereign power of the world, war against Judah, a sister kingdom church. Inspiration makes a type of that church and church and state confederacy. And by it definitely points out the trend which the nominal churches and the sovereign powers of the world are to take now in the antitype. So it makes known, moreover, that they will not prosper in it. I mean, this is what we read, end of quote. The fact that they will not prosper is what we read also in the type. You remember God says the church-state confederacy between Syria and Israel was not to last. It was to be broken within 65 years. So even this one, the forthcoming, will not stand. And that's what we are taught. So we are taught that, again, these Protestant nations and the Protestant churches are going to form another church-state confederacy. This is what we learn from 2TG number 41 over on page 18 that we have just read. Let's read more about that. So now, the understanding of the final healing of the wound is the key of to understand the church-state confederacy in the time of Assyria, the leopard-like beast. Tract number 12 on page 25, paragraph 1, gives us a meaning of the final healing of the wound. So it says, and I quote, detail by detail, we are thus far enabled to see that the healing of the wound is indicative not only of the churches failing to carry the Protestant Reformation to completion, but also of the world's governments soon reverting to the despotic principles of the Dark Ages. Did you hear that? The word reverting means going back. To where? It says to the dark, to the despotic. The word despotic means dictatorial in nature. Principles of the Dark Ages. It says to the rule of action before the wound was inflicted. So you simply go to the beast chart, which we have right there before you, but not this part. You notice that there is a wound on the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13. But before it, there is a beast with a horn head. So when it says the meaning of the healing of the wound is an indication of two things. Number one, the church has failed to carry reformation to its completion, which is to kill the beast. Then number two, it indicates that the world is going back to the dictatorial tendencies of the Dark Ages. In other words, you have the unification of the head and the horn. And the head represents the church, and the horn represents a sovereign or hidden power. And that's the healing. So here we have the true healing of the wound. It is the joining of the church and the state. And that is to happen in our time. And this is what we have to understand. And we have already seen that this would be Church-State Confederacy number 3. And the most important one to understand, I've talked of the other two, only to lay foundation for us to understand this very one. By the time we have the fourth one, would have been saved and in the kingdom. And it is not our problem, it will be the problem for the great multitude that will be still in the world. As for members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, true ones would have been standing on Mount Zion with the Lamb, and there is no way the devil can cause them any trouble. Okay, so that's the final healing, the joining of the church and state, and this cannot be applied to any other beast other than the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13. Okay, so 2SR page 85, paragraph 1. Speaking of the leopard-like beast, it says, the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13, verses 1 to 10, is the only symbolical prophecy that tells of the fall of Roman monarch, the crowning of the 10 kings, the wound of the papas, the Reformation and rise of Protestantism, and the captivity of the Pope. All right, so this quote is telling us that this beast, the leopard-like of Revelation 13, is the one that shows the four. All these facts brought out in this quote, the four papas indicated by the wound. I mean, this is what you read in 2SR page 107. And then the rise of Protestantism by the crowned, horns. But when it says in verse 3, and his deadly wound was healed, according to tract number 12, page 25, paragraph 1, it shows that we go back to the order of things before the wound was inflicted. And we know what used to obtain back then. It was persecution. It was a church-state confederacy. So this is to show that there is yet another church-state confederacy to be set up in our day. That would be number 3. Let's carry on. So here we have more details concerning the confederacy number 3. I said this is the most important one. You don't want to miss this one because it directly involves you and me. All right, so from the Blue Book, 13 symbolic code number 3 on page 10, paragraph 2, we read, the confederacy that we are studying this afternoon, by the way, they studied it in the afternoon that time. That's the first time the prophet gave it. Says, commences before the loud cry and before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9. I did underline this part. Before the loud cry. The loud cry is in the time of the leopard-like, is in the time of the scarlet-colored beast of Revelation 17. But the one we are discussing right here is before that time. So if you check on the beast chart, before is the leopard-like. That is before the scarlet. Then it says before, even before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9, meaning before the church, Seventh-day Adventist, is purified, we have a church-state confederacy. It continues. It is not the image of the beast. Hey, we talked about the image. I read to you about the image. The image is the scarlet. So it says, it is not the image of the beast. For this association precedes, the word precedes means before, comes before the image of the beast. So it is during the beast itself, which is the leopard-like, which is Assyria, our time, comma, and the confederacy is formed when the nations are getting themselves for war. Come on. There's no other time than our time that nations are getting themselves for war. You see that on media, we also, everyone does. Then it says, put another word, the confederacy will commence after the sealing. You see? And perhaps just before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9. Moreover, it is in the time when the Christian nations are united that the woman Babylon will sit on the 7 heads, depicting also the union of the church under Babylon. All right, so we have war in preparation right now. Nations are getting themselves for war during Assyria, and that's the time we are going to have the 3rd church-state confederacy before that of the image beast, which will be in the time of Babylon, symbolized or represented by the scarlet-colored beast. All right, so important takeaways here. We have scarlet-colored beast. That's the image. Okay, and that's the 4th church-state confederacy. And during that period, there is no war. The war is now. Look at this, the leopard-like beast confederacy number 3. We have the gigantic war of Zechariah 14:2. Okay. Do we have any more details in regard to this church-state confederacy? Or we move to the last one. All right, before we go there, we have this one. It is 2 Sarah, page 112, paragraph 4. Now, it's dealing about the scarlet beast. It says the scarlet-colored beast is the last symbolical beast in the continuous chain of historical events. Yes, it is. It says this beast does not arise from the sea like the beast before it, but was seen in the wilderness. Therefore, the scarlet-colored beast is created by an historical incident, unlike the beasts before it. We have the lion, we have the bear, we have the leopard, we have the nondescript beast, and also the leopard-like. All these came out of the sea. But this one was seen in the wilderness. So what are we told by this quote? It's simply telling us that the scarlet comes on the stage of action when there is peace among nations. So when is the time when there is war? It is during the leopard-like beast, our time, Assyria. There we have a church-state confederacy. It says the symbol denotes that it is not strife and wars between the nations that brings this beast upon the stage of action, but rather a principle that is opposite of the symbol. What symbol? Troubled sea. And what is that? The opposite would be, the opposite of troubled sea would be peace. That's the time the scarlet-colored beast will come on stage of action. Again, clearly indicating that in the time of Assyria, our time, there is war, there is a church-state confederacy and war at the time when the church is being purified. Right? Now let's move on and read another quote. It is now track number 14. This one is based on the book of Nahum, the 3 chapters. It's all about war, World War II, okay, in its entirety, phase 1 and phase 2. Now here in track number 14, we want to read on page 22 and paragraph 2. It reads, here in prophetic utterances, here in prophetic utterance is not only a promise to purify the church when modern Assyria is being crushed. Did you hear that? The church will be purified at the time of war when the Protestant nations, America leading, will be losing the war. It says, comma, but also a suggestive statement as to what constitutes meat in due season for men today, and as to what movement they are to enlist in if they would make sure of salvation. This is the time we have the present truth, the shepherd's rod. They, it continues, are enjoined to fix their vision upon the feet of him that brings good tidings. Who is that? It's no other than Elijah. It says, message from the Lord. Yes, it says here, he the Lord, comma, who publishes peace, the peace of Christ's kingdom, and who declares that while the powers of the earth are engulfed in a gigantic war, the wicked in the church shall be cut off, no more to pass through her. End of quote. This is very clear. We have war in the time of Assyria, and the church is going to be purified at what time? When America and her allies will lose the war. Okay, so we can move on. All right, so we come to the fourth and final church-state confederacy, that of Babylon, the SCB, okay, of Revelation 17 and 18. We are reading from 2 SR, page 113, paragraph 4. It says, it will be noticed that the scarlet-colored beast is crownless, as the nondescript beast of Daniel 7, verse 7 and 8. The 10 horns in the first stage of the nondescript beast, representing imperial Rome, had no crowns because they had received no kingdom as yet. But in his second stage, that is after the fall of imperial Rome, in reality, they should have been crowned. The little horn having the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things, which is a combination of a hornhead, union of church and state, the purpose. Being supreme, the horns could have no crowns, showing the purpose was to rule over kings. The scarlet-colored beast is also controlled by the woman riding on his back, in brackets, church and state. So there we have the fourth and final, and it is being likened to that of the purpose. the first century, the Dark Ages period. Then it continues, says, thus it denotes that she is the authority, that is the woman on the back of the beast, or the crown, for she rules the beast. I mean, the rider rules. This is one of the reasons why the crowns are absent on his beast, on this beast. The last is an image of the first, verifying the fact that the scarlet-colored beast represents the image of the beast, period, fulfilling Revelation 13, verses 12 and 15. And he exercises all the powers of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. See, we have a death decree out of this Church-State Confederacy. Okay, so to cause, rather to speak, is to declare a union, a church-state federation, and to cause is to command everyone to get along with that system or else be killed. Then the last part here says the difference between the two drastic systems is reviewed by the two symbols, horn, head on the one, and the woman riding on the other. So he's making use of the first one to help us to understand the last one. I mean the first one in the New Testament era, which is that of the Dark Ages, the horn-head, purpose. All right, so they are both read by the church, showing that there is a union between a sovereign state and the church. Now we come to page 114 of the same book, 2 Sarah, paragraph 3. Still on the fourth Church-State Confederacy, the last one. It says, the commencement of that act will be marked when the following prediction is fully realized. What prediction? When Protestantism shall stretch out her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of Roman power, when she shall reach over to the abyss to grasp hands with spiritualism, when under the influence of this threefold union, our country, that's America, shall repudiate every principle of its constitution as a Protestant and Republican government. I guess this is what Sister O was talking about. And shall make provision for the propagation of papal falsehood and delusions. Then we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan, and that the end is near. End of quote. Yeah, so when we come to the fourth and final Church-State Confederacy, then we have come to the end of time. Okay, so continuing on the same, now we go to a statement in tract number 12, page 32, now paragraph 1. Says the crownless horns of the latter. The crownless horns of the latter again would be the scarlet-colored beast, show that he represents the world in a time in which there are no crowned kings, but that instead the world is ruled by an ecclesiastical head, the woman that drives the beast. Page 114, paragraph 1. He represents our world at its end, with its sovereign authority and theoretical theology under the dominion of the woman. All right. Then on page 33 of the same tract number 12, okay, now we are leaving 2SR, is it? Yeah, to 12 tract page 33. And paragraph 3 says, her sitting on the heads denotes that she is to control the churches, and her driving the beast denotes that she is to be the sovereign of the world. So it will be the fourth and the last one, the one symbolized by the woman sitting on the red beast of Revelation 17. Page 34 of tract 12, paragraph 1 says, so shortly after it is set up, this federation of church and state will be plunged headlong into oblivion, even as a great milestone that is cast into the sea, Revelation 18:21. And the cry of her mourners shall be, in 1 hour, so great riches is come to naught. This hour which brings the death throngs of Babylon can be none other that which, according to Jesus's parable of Matthew chapter 20, verses 11 to 16, is the last parabolical hour of the day. Okay? So you simply go to chart number 5. Then you see the 11th hour there. There is only 1 hour. That's the only hour that the scarlet-colored beast, or the woman, will reign. So it will not last for too long, then it will be destroyed. The verses and the facts are given here. Okay, so the rest of the quotation says, that is from the 11th hour call for laborers, the last message to the world, Malachi 4 verse 5, to the 12th hour, which is sunset, ancient timepiece, the end of the day, the close of the gospel period. Okay, the close of the harvest, according to Jeremiah 8 verse 20, the close of probation, even as it is noted in Revelation chapter 22 verse 11. End of quote. So that will be the close of probation. The final one. All right, so we have come to the close of this short presentation. It's a brief one. I didn't want to go in details. We can pick each confederacy in full detail as a full study. But today we simply wanted to understand that there are 4 of them, the Church-State Confederacies. 1 in the Old Testament, the 3 of them in the New Testament era. We have 2 of them in the past. We have 2 of them ahead of us. So here's the summary. Therefore, the first Church-State Confederacy is the history of the church. The type was, in the history of the church, the type was the one between Ephraim and Syria, a sovereign power in the Old Testament era. The second one is noted by the hornhead in Daniel 7 verse 8. The third and eminent and the most important one to us is the one noted by the king of the deadly wound of the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13:3, which we are to oppose. And the fourth and final one is noted by the woman sitting on the back of the scarlet-colored beast of Revelation 17. Right, so here we'll end, and take in questions. Let's see if anybody has any questions. All right, so we can unmute ourselves and get comments, Sister Ho.
Brother Obi, this is Brother
Yes.
Adrian. Thank
Brother
you for
who?
This is Brother Adrian.
Oh, yes, Brother Adrian. Go ahead, brother.
Thank you for the presentation. So I understand that the churches now are assisting with the healing of the wound by wandering after the beast, so to speak, with their abominations. Correct?
That's right.
Mm. Wow.
So we find that by the declaration of the second angel's message of Revelation 14, should be verse 8. The rest of the churches had turned to be Babylon. They did apostatize. The only church that remained since then, remember that was given around 1844, was Seventh-day Adventist. That's the only church that remained as a true Protestant and kept the wound on the leopard-like beast open. But now the fact that verse 3 says, and the deadly wound was healed, and the meaning of the final healing of the wound as given to us by the shepherd's rod in 12th tract, page 25, paragraph 1. You remember I read it. It says, detail by detail, we are thus far led to understand, I'm paraphrasing, the meaning of the healing of the wound. It says it is an indication of two things. Number one, the church, Seventh-day Adventist, being the last one, had stopped, protesting. It is now
you see that today.
getting along with the rest of the world, wandering after the beast, and thus leading to the governments reverting back to the despotic principles of the Dark Ages. That's the healing of the wound. That's the formation of a church-state confederacy. And that's what the church is doing right now with the state.
Wow.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, okay, earlier you said that it healed in 1929.
Yes.
But the Confederacy, the Third Confederacy, is when it's all the way healed. I'm kind of unclear about that. So when it healed in 1929, was that a partial healing?
Yes, that was only a partial healing. I must mention to you, Sister Ho and the rest of the dear beloveds, that the healing is as a result of an extended series of events. And to be more specific, 3 events. There are 3 stages of the healing. That's why I had to put a subtitle which says, what is the final healing? Meaning there are partial healings. By the year 1929, you notice that the way the Bible is recorded in regard to the healing of the deadly wound, the words was and healed are already in the past tense. And I read from 2SR where it says it means that by the time we understand the meaning of the healing would have already taken place. So by the year 1929, the healing had already taken place. That's why it is already saying was healed. So when was the first healing? It was, who knows, if I may ask from the audience here, when was the very first healing of the wound?
When they gave them back their power.
That was number 2.
Oh, that was 2. Sorry.
When was the first one? Because by 1929, it was already in the past tense, indicating that the first stage had already taken place. It was in 1890 when they rejected the message, the very message we have today, of 1888 by the 2 elders, E.J. Wagon and A.T. Jones. The hearing is by rejecting truth. So they have to reject the truth 3 times.
Amen.
First time, 1890. Second time would be 1929. The third time is ahead of us. We do not give a year. They rejected the Elijah message phase. They are going to reject the Jonah message phase, which I'm presenting to you right now. That will be another study, a full study. So I just want Sister Ho to understand that that was a partial hearing, and the hearing is in 3 stages. 2 are in the past. We are remaining with 1. The final one, when they shall join the church and the state by the new world order. You've heard of that, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was just curious, when in 1929, when the second healing happened, were they healed because was he healed, and did he receive his little estate in the Vatican in 1929 because they rejected the rod, or did the rod come after
No.
after that, or does it matter?
Okay, you notice that the rod came in 1929
First
through the
time.
Sabbath school lessons, the first quarter, if you go to 1 SR. And
Yes.
that was presented by Brother Hotef in the church. Okay. He took the last 13 chapters of the book of Isaiah, and he made it one continuous letter addressing the Seventh-day Adventist people. But the first publication came the following year, which was 1930. But before that, he took a manuscript to the leadership of the church, men of experience. They rejected it. And that's why he says we grant the interpretation by the very HDA that the granting of civil power back to the Italian government was an indication that the wound has healed. He says we say yes to that, but that was partial. Because we have to have the final one when they join the 2. We are definitely going to have that study. The healing of the wound, the infliction and the healing. And we are going to see the infliction in 3 stages and the healing in the same 3 stages. Sure. These numbers are very significant. You know that. It's one way the truth is revealed through numbers. We can talk about the number 3 being the name of Jesus Christ. You have seen the movement of the stream of our headquarters 3 times, all those things. Yes. Another good question. Those were good questions. I'm glad you have observed that, and I like it because it prepares our minds for the next study.
Can I make a comment? I just want to say that this study, I've heard it so many times, and it's like it's hard to get. It really is hard to understand, but it seems like every time you hear it, you understand a little bit more. So, for you kind of new who's hearing it for the first time, you'll have to go over it, again and again and hear it. and then things will start making sense. You know, and as we see events start to unfold, like what Sister Hall was talking about earlier, how we could see how we tell them don't oppose this because it looks good. We can see those coming into play. And so this study is so important to know and understand. And I look forward to you presenting this, you know, to going in further into details when these events will actually happen and our role that we play in it. So thank you.
Amen.
Amen. That's true. Remember our opening, our prayer thought of symbolic code number 6, and it was page 18. We are told that the truth will get deeper and deeper. At first, we only knew about that of the image, but come on, that is of the image. So if the image is to show a church-state confederation, then it must be first in the object. The object is the leopard-like beast, our time. So we have to have a church-state confederation in our time, which will be duplicated in the time of the image. So it is by studying these things again and again, cast out all the idols. Our idols is anything that we treasure more than the kingdom of God, that will make us not to understand. You remember?
But, Brother Obi, I just want to say that a lot of the Davidians, they don't teach this confederacy. They don't know about it. They're only looking for the Sunday law to pass, the scarlet-colored beast, and that's it. But you know, not teaching how, when the leopard-like beasts go down. You know, so
what?
it's confusing for a lot of Davidians and some who've been in these other groups and coming in to, you know, get this. Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to agree with you, Sister Judy. This is one study which sets a distinction between the true headquarters and the false ones. And this is why I gave you that quote. I want you to understand it. Of symbolic code number 6, page 18. There is a distinction. There are two classes. People with the gift that will be purified and made white and be given the gift of understanding. The other people are not. We take it for granted that we, by mere professing to be a Davidian, then we are Davidians. No. Look, we have so many churches, but God recognizes only one. We are so many associations, but God recognizes only one. And what sets the difference is the deep understanding. I mean, the truth says would get deeper and deeper. They really don't know about this. They don't teach this. So we have to understand it and share to our brothers and sisters from these other, you know, counterfeit associations around.